Welcome to Season 5 of Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, Executive and Career Life Coach. This season, we're exploring one of the most misunderstood capabilities in leadership, courage. Not the dramatic kind, but the everyday courage to step into discomfort, speak up when it matters, make hard calls, and lead forward even when the path isn't clear. You'll hear from executives and coaches sharing real moments that tested them and shaped their careers. My hope is that each conversation invites you to reflect on your own relationship with courage, where it's serving you, and where a braver step may be just ahead. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. This season, when I was planning it and I was thinking about the topic of leadership courage, which is so present for me right now, I knew that my guest today was somebody I needed to have on the show. And I'm really excited about it for so many reasons. But I'm really happy to welcome Cristina Santos, who is currently the Senior Vice President, Head of Talent and Culture at Capital Group. And I feel proud of her just saying that, and you'll find out why in a minute. So Christina's background is she started off on the commercial side of the pharma business, as I did. She started with great background in sales. You'll see in a moment. And if you met her, she's got the beautiful personality to sell anything she believes in. Um, then, as she proved herself there, she moved into marketing roles, sales leadership roles, commercial excellence, training and development. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited to talk to her today is back in the day when she and I knew each other when we were kids. I vividly remember having mentoring conversations with Christina about where she wanted to go, which was very different than where she was. She was in sales and marketing roles and training roles, and she saw the future vision of doing exactly what she's doing today. And she mapped out what that path would look like and the moves she needed to make that happen. And I know that courage came into that. And so it's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to talk to Christina today. She changed companies. She reinvented herself in ways that aligned with that vision. And it's like I feel proud of you, which sounds funny to say because I know the way you created this vision for yourself, and I'm super excited to talk to you about it. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I love hearing you say that you feel proud because it takes me literally back to your office and some of those mentoring conversations. And some were like tear producing. But yeah, look, I'm proud of me too. I can't believe that I get to do this work. And it's been really fun. And not always super fun and easy by any stretch, but there's a lot behind it. So thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
And all the things that you mention are just like part of a meaningful journey. It's not easy. I mean, everyone who listens to my stuff knows I say we've got to embrace the discomfort in order to grow. And you've done that and you own it. And I think by being upfront about it too, it helps other people. So I appreciate that.
Mm.
Okay, so let's start off with tell me your perspective, Christina, on like how you personally define leadership courage.
So it's funny, Brandy. I like all of these words started swimming in my mind, and I am a huge Brene Brown fan, so I could go down that rabbit hole. I actually went to ChatGPT and I'm like, tell me what courage means. And it said like acting in the face of fear and danger and adversity. And
Yeah.
then it also said that courage at the core is it's based on the word heart. And that resonates so much more with me that leadership courage is leading from the heart. It's understanding what's important to you, what matters most, and then having the conviction to follow that. That to me, like as soon as I saw it, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like that's real. If I said that I value courage in others, when I dig into the why, it's because there's congruence in who they are, what they believe, and what they're doing. So I think it's leading from the heart.
I love that. I actually haven't used my friend ChatGPT around this, and I'm really glad that you bring it up because the heart thing, the thing that occurs to me is, you're absolutely right. Courage is doing the thing that scares us, and I think about confidence is what enables us to do the thing we know.
Mm,
Courage is what enables us to do the thing that we don't know. And the heart piece of it comes in so strongly because that's why it's worth doing.
yeah,
Is because it's aligned to who we are and what we're about and what we're, the stand we take.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
That's so great. Tell me about a moment when, in your career when courage was really required of you, whether you felt ready or not.
So, as I was walking to the office this morning, I was reflecting on a very important conversation that you and I had. I mean, I can tell you how many years ago it was. It was about 14 years ago. Um, because it was so pivotal in my career, in my life, and a demonstration of courage when I never would have defined it as such at the time. But I guess it was 13 so years ago. I was in a very visible, high exposure, high importance impact role at the company that we worked at together. And I had just come back from maternity leave. I had my fourth child that I was not expecting to have, by the way. And she's a miracle, and I'm so glad she's here, and I can't imagine my life without her. But I came back with this, it wasn't fear, but this idea that this was a role that I was in that was so important to the organization that if I was going to do it well, it required 110% of my attention. And here I am with this newborn, and I've seen that movie before because she's the fourth. So I know what's required. And this was an unexpected blessing. So I wanted and needed to make a very difficult decision of could I pour myself into this role that I was in the way that was needed, or could I go back into a role that I had done in a previous life that was there for me, and would make my demands of being a mother at the time that much more doable. I had to make that difficult, and now I'll say courageous choice of do I stay and do I push this thing and maybe at the cost of bonding and at a time where you don't get that time back with a newborn, or do I pivot? Um, I mean, you know the ending of the story. I pivoted and I went back into a role where that would afford me more flexibility that I could sort of do with my arms tied behind my back. And we entered into some very interesting conversations. And I think you coached me through that. Like, if I was going to make that decision, what are the things I needed to make clear with my then leader to make sure I don't fall off the radar and whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I stepped down from a big job and a big opportunity, and many people would look at that as career limiting. And I remember somebody else in the office saying, how are you going to explain how you failed to other people? And I was so aghast at his reaction. Yeah, I had the same face. And I'm like, what? And I quickly like owned the narrative and said, no, 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 that's not what happened here. Nobody's failing. Like to, I'm choosing my daughter right now because that's what's needed, and the company needs something that I can't give it at the moment. Um, and then fast forward, everything ended up working out even better than I could have imagined. But if I look back on that, I was fraught with fear, angst. I was so emotional that people were going to think less of me. But in my heart of hearts, it was the only decision to be made. And that's what I did.
Yeah. That such an interesting story, and I really appreciate you sharing it. There's a lot in there. There's a element of the decision that's, I'll call it right for you, is dependent on your life stage and who you are at that time and what you want and what's important to you. The other thing is and you may have done this unconsciously or accidentally, however, you took control of the narrative and you advocated for yourself and the decision that was right for you. And in that one interaction you talked about, that other person didn't see it the same way or didn't see the nuances and would have made another decision, but you didn't let the she failed live and become truth. You took control of that.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I referenced that very example 2 weeks ago, Randy, with somebody on my team who took a step back, two steps back, actually, went from being a leader of others to being an individual contributor because the role they were in was just not what they needed at the time. And they were so fraught with what other people were going to think. And I was so grateful to be able to pull up this example and say, no, 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 look at it from a very different perspective. And I don't want you for a second to think that that says anything less about your skills, your expertise, your brilliance, your potential based on a very wise decision you made. And by the way, that person is stepping back into people leadership in a different capacity and they're beyond flourishing. But I think there's something to the agency of like owning why you're doing it. And that brings me back to the heart. Like in your heart, what's important? And then how do you come up with sharing with others what it means if that's important to like to your sense of self that's a shared understanding.
Yeah, and I mean that goes to another point where sometimes we want to keep these things, private. Even talking about them may feel self-absorbed somehow, but there's value in it from a standpoint of understanding where your place is and what value you offer the company today, keeping that potential alive, but also helping others when you're in a leadership role. I mean, that stand you took and that decision that you made wasn't just about you and your family, it had ripples. And I have to believe it gave other people agency to make the decision that was right for them. Hopefully, women and men.
Yeah, yeah, I think yes, absolutely. And I think too often we contain leadership courage in the bucket of strong, bold, decisive actions. And I think we forget that it's equally important to define courage from a perspective of vulnerability. And if we just project all that boldness and decisiveness all the time, then we're telling others that's the only way that you should comport yourself. And that's not true. And the more vulnerable you are, then the more you're giving people an opportunity to do the same. And leadership without trust honestly doesn't exist. So I think it's how you build the trust. But we can't talk about vulnerability. We can't talk about courage without including conversation about vulnerability.
And that one's hard for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you coach people along that line to get comfortable to take that step? Because that does require courage.
I'm better at it now, but that's because I've made the mistakes in the past, right? I think it's for a long time, I thought that you needed to project a certain, presence. You had to always be confident. You had to always have others believe that you were really convicted in what you were doing. And that is helpful and it gets you a long way, especially in really extroverted spaces like sales and commercial roles that we've been in for a long time. I think maybe in when I pivoted to HR roles in earnest, it gave me a different perspective. And I started to more deeply appreciate, or even just leading bigger teams, deeply appreciating how important it is to connect on a more personal level and to not just consider how people are receiving me, but consider like, how am I making them feel? How, like, to what end am I doing the things that I'm doing? And that pivot is very different. So when I coach people to it today, I usually use personal examples because it satisfies two things. I mean, storytelling is always really powerful,
Right?
and two, they can, if they hear it coming from me or from you or from somebody that they respect or they're working with in a certain capacity, then there's proof and there's evidence of, well, if she's been through this and she's okay and look at the work that she's doing now, then I can too. So I try to shed the walls as much as I can, and I use those personal examples and they run the gamut. I mean, I talk about breaking down and crying to a peer leadership team because burnout was very real for me, and then what came after it. So I think it's important I don't ever just focus on that point of vulnerability, but then what was the aftermath? What were the benefits of doing it and what
Yeah.
sort of led me up to it? I think that's important to tell the whole story.
That's great. That's really, really helpful. And the way I think about it along those lines is sometimes the hardest things we go through are the things that serve us best later in some way. We don't
Yeah.
always get to know what that looks like today.
Yeah.
And and that's a choice too. We either can think about that courageous stand, what was so hard about it, and pull the good out of it, or we just let the moment pass. And I don't know, maybe it's my rationalization of the hardest things that I go through are going to serve me because I'm going to find it. But it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I think, just how we're built, right? I mean, it's what keeps us optimistic. It's
Mm.
what keeps us driven. I mean, if we didn't reflect in that way, then I think we would probably walk around pretty miserable. At least I would.
Or at least playing smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's funny. I was just listening to instances this morning where people play small or they play careless. Um, and I've never been one to want to do either. Obviously, you want to play big, but play smart and thoughtfully, and not without being well and informed and well intentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you think of an example? It might be your own or something that you've seen around you when you felt like someone not acting courageously held them back or created, impacted the business or themselves.
Um, I think there's many. You know, Sometimes I see it come up most, and it's going to be a weird connection, but sometimes in performance management situations where it's so obvious as a leader when you're watching somebody, and even in myself, if I do some playbacks of times where I was less proud of how I acted because I wasn't happy with the role that I was in or the promotion I didn't get. I think there's sometimes a lack of courage is what stops people from breaking through to better performance. And I think the most interesting and impactful conversations I've ever had with people that I've had the privilege of leading, where I can see them like they can't get out of their own way and I'm helping them work through it. Um, I try to approach it from that perspective and say, what's holding you back? What's frustrating you? What's getting in the way of you doing your best work? And by the way, Randy, sometimes the answer is they break through and they do the thing and they face the hard truth and they get the feedback and they realize there's that moment where they realize that I'm not here to hurt them. I'm here to help them and I want to see them succeed,
Sure.
which is always beautiful. And then the flip side is some of the most stuck folks I've ever worked with are those who weren't willing or courageous enough to say out loud that they were in the wrong place, in the wrong role, in the wrong industry, and that was immensely frustrating. So when something finally happens and they end up in some instances leaving and pursuing something entirely different, you see them flourish in a way that you never saw them do when they were working with you. And that is the most beautiful thing. So I feel like I have a lot of those examples and they make me so proud. And in some instances, it's because they don't work with me anymore, but they're physician's assistants or they're running a company somewhere. It's muddy when you get through it, but it's so amazingly rewarding on the other side.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we don't get to play back the tape, but it's interesting to think if people hadn't made that decision, if they had stayed in the thing that didn't quite fit, their life would turn out differently.
Yeah, but I also think there's something to be said, and that's why I'm so glad you're concentrating on leadership courage. What I define as courage today, I think is just good leadership. I think it's just good, honest conversation. I mean, to be able to sit down with somebody and say, you're not meeting the expectation, but let's talk about why. And like that to be really clear and to not dance around things, like that is not helpful. So sometimes where people need, and I'm sure you see this in your work all the time, people need coaching having difficult conversations. Like both things can exist at the same time. You can care deeply about people and you can, give them tough messages. And I think that lack of clarity is sometimes getting in the way of the breakthroughs. I've certainly been on the receiving end of those conversations, and I have always been so grateful. It hurts like hell when you're in the middle of it. Um,
Yeah.
but until somebody tells you, get out of your own head, or when you do this, it steamrolls others and you shut them, like you're not going to know. So that's how I enter into the discussion to say, I'm going to give you some feedback and it's going to hurt, but I'm telling you why I'm sharing it with you because I know what you're capable of. I know what we can do together. And until we have this discussion, we're not going to get there. That's not courage. That's just being a good leader.
Yeah. It's interesting because what you're talking about is so important in terms of having the courage to have the conversation that needs to be had, to talk about the thing. And sometimes it's revealing a blind spot or talking about the thing that maybe they're most afraid of, but
Yeah.
it is what you have to do. It's the courage that we have, the commitment we have to them. Sometimes it's even a step back from that, and it's people taking on giving themselves, well, thinking about the whole performance management process, which takes on a life of its own in some companies. It's remarkable to me how many times I took over a team and I would read a previous performance appraisal and it didn't match what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And then I would sort of get some background and why is this? Because I really wanted to have the conversation they needed to have. And I literally heard from people several times, yeah, that situation needed to be dealt with. Nobody dealt with it. We kept passing it along.
Right.
Now it's yours. And part of me would feel like, why is this my job? But I took it seriously and I felt like I could make a difference. So just having the courage to take on the conversation that needs to be had, to make that decision is one thing, and then to have it in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree with you more. And I know we could probably have a whole conversation on that alone. But I think it's part of why I love getting to do the work that I do now and I've been doing gosh for almost 10 years now, Randy. And you like
Wow.
you I which is bananas to think about. But you mentioned I made a massive pivot and there was a moment of clarity around, I'd say 2010, where I started really appreciating that all of the things that we worked in from a commercial standpoint were great and very rewarding. But what really mattered to me most was the culture and how are we pouring into people and what happens when you don't? What happens when that's not the most important thing getting the strategic attention? And that's when I became in love with the idea of getting to do this work full time. But it took me 6 years to go from saying I wanted to do it and having conversations with you and basically anybody that would listen and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, well, at the time I wanted to be a chief diversity officer because that was at the core of this work. And that's just expanded to mean culture more broadly and now talent and recruiting and development and all the things in between. But I I don't think we pay enough attention to the people side of fill in the blank to whatever business it is. And that's what I fell in love with.
I mean, obviously you're speaking my language. I just feel like I worry sometimes because the business environment is a little bit tough right now, and I see a lot of companies pulling back on this investment rather than making more into this investment, and it worries me um, because I think they're leaving a lot on the table, business-wise, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think in some ways that was the one unexpected surprise and benefit to me crossing over, if you will, that imaginary bridge. And I remember like talking through with you, how do you help people understand that inviting you into the HR world or inviting you into these very highly specialized roles isn't a risk? And I went in very bold-faced and said, you're looking for these skills. These are the skills that I've developed in a different capacity. But by the way, if you give me this shot, and let me go from being a commercial leader to working in, inclusion and diversity and culture and the like, I have street cred. I have street cred with all of the people we're trying to drive these things with. So I think in so many ways, like it's been very much to my benefit to be able to draw from my commercial experience and that sales experience and the polish and the communication, all the things that are table stakes when you're in a client facing type role. I don't care if it's in finance or pharma or anything in between. That's been so helpful.
The importance of that is tremendous. And the reality is, there are some people that you have that conversation with, they can't see it, they're closed to it, they can't hear you, that's not their language. But there's a huge amount of people that just haven't thought about it before.
Mhm.
And you can open a whole world for them to think about. If they use that curiosity and they use that new awareness, it opens up so much opportunity for talent and I believe increasing their business.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. But you have to be able to speak in a way that others will hear it.
Yeah.
And you have to be open yourself to saying, okay, this isn't working. So I sometimes say, like, I don't care what brought you to church. I'm just glad that you found your religion. And it could just be because you like to sit next to that person that's next to you. It doesn't matter to me, but let's just make sure we're bringing in as many people as we can
Yeah.
so that people see the importance of it.
And it's I'm sure you have this experience as well. It's remarkable to me how many times, I mean, my clients come to me for a certain reason. We're having these conversations. It's remarkable to me how often out in the world, I'll tell people what I do. They may not even know what an executive coach is. But in having that conversation, stuff comes out. And these are people that you would think, man, they've made it. They are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that they need to be talking about and looking at in order for their own fulfillment to be optimized that nobody ever engages them. They don't give themselves permission to think about. So I just love what you're saying.
Well, and by the way, and because you see this all the time with your clients, the higher up you get, the fewer truth tellers around you you're going to have, and the more you feel like you need to project this infallibility that you know all, and you've got it all together. Everybody needs an outlet of some
Yeah.
sort, and I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that drew me to this work and one of my most favorite things to do with clients is support people at a time when they've just taken on a big new level of responsibility because they hold themselves, I certainly did, hold myself to a point of, wow, I've made it. I got my dream job. It's the moment where I'm supposed to look like I know what the heck I'm doing. And it maybe is a moment when I have felt that the least. And
Yeah.
that's a time when you really need some support and you just need some trusted people around you.
Well, it's funny. I the title that you shared at the beginning is a very new title for me. So it just happened in August of last year, and it significantly changed my span of control, the number of teams that I have. And the first thing I said to this new organization is, this is new to me. I am going to make some mistakes. I am going to ask for grace ahead of time. And I shared with them that the last time I had a team of this size was when I worked in a commercial capacity and I had a very large sales team with like several teams underneath, but everybody was doing the same thing.
Hmm.
I now have six different teams that do six very different things. And so the context switching is there on steroids, and some of which I have never done before. And it's so interesting because if I think back to the younger version of myself, I would have probably stepped into it with a very different kind of bravado and said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to tackle it. And instead, in this instance, I was of course grateful for the opportunity, and one of the first things I said was like, look, some of this is new, some of this might not work out, and I just want to be open with the highest level of leadership within the organization. So thank you for your trust. Let's see how this goes. And then I'm approaching it in the same way with the broader team. And I would have never couched that as courage, but I think going back to my comment earlier about vulnerability, it has been so helpful for me. And it's also like maintained an expectation level and a calibration that I think is really important. And I think it's already started to yield much more transparency and good question asking and good conversation. Randy, I'm learning. And I think it's important to us, for everybody to admit, like, when are you in learning mode? When are you not? And it's been very cathartic for me to say some of those things out loud. And let's see how it goes, right? I mean, we're 6 months in, but
But that's fantastic. And I think the benefit you're not mentioning, and I hope you do appreciate, is the leadership by example that shows for others to acknowledge if there's something some information they don't have, knowledge, experience they don't have, something that they want to complement what they do have, kind of thing. You've given a whole permission structure to a lot of people to do just that. So that's great. That's so great.
Yeah.
All right, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And that is, what advice do you give leaders on your team, people that come to you who want to strengthen that sort of courage muscle that maybe they're aware they see it and admire it in others, they want to do more of it themselves?
Um, I, I think it's a conversation, maybe more than advice giving. I think you have to ask some good questions first. So I would first want to know, like you asked me, what do you mean by courage? When you're saying this, like what does that look like? You've succeeded at being a courageous leader when, and then fill in the blank. So that helps give us some common language. Because the advice that I would provide to someone who wants to be courageous in how they show up in big group settings and contributions to a big, difficult, hairy project is going to be different than someone that says, courage to me is vulnerability or having humility or being in learning mode. So I think getting underneath that first, what are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? And then I can hopefully give you some advice that will be helpful based on my own past experience. But I would also probably just go back to my definition that if it feels good and you're following your heart, then that's courageous. If there's things that you're challenged with that you don't have clarity, let's work on that together. But I would I would invite people to really search themselves first. I don't think we pay enough mind, time, attention, focus to that self-reflection. And you do this so well as a coach. I mean, that's so critical to the work. You have to know who are you at your core, what are your strengths, what are your drivers. If you don't know that, you're gonna show up as rudderless much of the
Yeah,
time. So that's what I would say. I'd ask some good questions. What do you mean by that? What does success look like? And then really go into reflection mode too. And then say, okay, how do we work together to help you follow your heart?
that's great. And it is a very similar conversation to that I have with a lot of clients. Sometimes we also go into an element of what's really at risk here.
Yeah,
Because sometimes, like, there are times when if the risk is I might lose my job and I have a family to support, that might be a stand you don't want to take. Like,
that's
that
right.
may be the right decision for you today. But sometimes when we think about what's really at risk, it's not that bad. And it's something we can easily fix. So sometimes that makes it easier.
Well, and just to help people really quantify the risk. I don't think most of us, like we imagine that there's this boogeyman that if something goes wrong, but like nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to be irreparably harmed because of it. Your ego might be bruised and you're going to learn a ton in the process. So it's a good reminder and perspective taking exercise that I'm sure I don't give enough attention to either. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the time and the focus and the attention. I think the thing that is woven through all the things that you shared is your authenticity and your willingness to be vulnerable and take the thing on and showing that example to others. I mean, the ripples in the pond that you have created are probably a lot more powerful than you recognize. And it has been every bit as much a pleasure to talk to you today as I knew it would. I'm like very grateful for the time and I think this is going to benefit a lot of the folks that are listening to us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Randy. So good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.